Welcome to fall time bass fishing. This time of year can be one of the most exasperating times for a bass fisherman. The bass can be anywhere from 2 foot of water to 50 foot of water. The water can be gin clear, it can be low. There's so many factors that change the fishing. We've had some extremely bad weather last night. We got a big front approaching, and it's going to be real interesting to see what the fish are doing out there. One of the things that you really want to watch for this time of year is bait fish and creek channels. Fish have a tendency to relate to the channels more so in the fall than any other time. Another thing that you want to watch for is off-colored water. A lot of times this will help you find more fish because it'll put the fish shallower. You pretty well have to fish the lake just like you do in the summertime or springtime. Pick you out an area and spend some time experimenting in this area. One thing that I've always found though, when I find the fish relating to the channels, generally there are more than one fish. It's not just an individual fish pattern, so I key more on channels in the fall than any other time. In this video, with the use of maps and graphics and me looking for fish, I'm going to show you how I look for fish in the fall of the year. Let's go bass fishing. You know, one of the key things about finding fish or looking for fish in the fall, or really any time of year, is to eliminate things. You've got to throw certain baits and eliminate them before you can say that they're not working. And that takes a little bit of time. It's not anything that's cut and dried. When I first go out looking for fish, I like to throw a spinnerbait or a topwater plug or a plastic worm, the same old baits that you always throw. But usually to start with, I'll throw baits that I can cover water with, like a topwater or a spinnerbait. That way you can move around a little bit and kind of get the feel of what kind of water you've got to look for the fish. Pretty clear water here, and we don't have any wind at all in this pocket, and usually that'll dictate the bait that I throw more so than anything else. If it was real windy and blowing in here good and strong, then I'd have a spinnerbait on or a crankbait of some sort. When it's real still conditions like this and I feel like the fish are still shallow, that's when I'm going to throw a surface bait or maybe something like a sluggo, an underwater floating worm. Calm conditions usually call for something that's not so highly visible, especially in clear water like this. You get a little bit more off-color water, then your lure selection will change quite a bit. I know there's shallow fish this time of year. There always is, and just about any lake that you want to go to, late October, early November, that's what I consider fall in most areas. And you've got two kinds of fish. You've got deep fish and you've got shallow fish. And you just kind of have to look around and get the feel of which ones are the easiest to catch. Real clear water lakes like this one, boy, they can be anywhere from 0 to 50 or 60 feet deep. And they can get extremely difficult to find. But see, the key thing you got in your favor in the fall of the year, to me, is channels. I mean, that helps you eliminate a lot of water. And I'm in here now back in a little old creek where two pockets come together and got a lot of chunk rock on the bank, and it's a key starting point. And even though I haven't had a bite on this bank right here, I'm not really eliminating it just yet because there's not any wind in here. Conditions are not good. Clearwater lakes, boy, now I'll tell you, they're especially very finicky on calm days. Boy, when you don't have any wind at all blowing, it really makes them tough to catch. To me, fall of the year is very much like the springtime in a lot of ways. You can go back in a creek in the morning and fish and not see any activity, no bait fish, no fish striking, you know, nothing happening. And then turn right around and go back in that same creek about 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and boy, the shad will just come to the top and you'll be seeing schools of bait moving around and fish busting in them. So timing is pretty important here. That's why so many times that it takes a couple days of fishing to really get on a good pattern or even figure out where the fish are, because you have to go back and just keep trying things. Try pockets for a while, and if you don't do no good, move out on the points and fish a little bit deeper for a couple hours, and if that's not working either, reverse it, turn around, go back to the pockets again, back in the creeks. I just skip around. I'm going to stay basically with the same pattern: creeks, points, rocks, ditches, channels. I'm going to stay with that pattern, and because I know that's where the fish are. I mean, that's where they are in the fall of the year. There's no doubt about it. And I'm going to continue to hit that kind of water, just going from one to the other until I finally figure out where most of the fish are. And until they bite, or until you catch a few of them, you really haven't established anything, so you can't give up. You just have to keep fishing basically that same kind of water till you do get a few strikes. Now, that's one thing about fishing in real clear water. It just don't take me long to establish that a certain pocket's not going to produce any fish. Even though that pocket back there may have had plenty of bass in it, the conditions weren't right to catch them. So I'm going to come back out here and get on a main channel bank where the old creek channel itself is under the water, and it runs in here pretty close to these big rocks where I've got the wind washing in. So many times that's a key factor, is having a little bit of breeze blowing in on a bank. And more often than not, it's the main ingredient in catching a few bass in an area. Put on a big spinnerbait so you can cover a little bit of water, and put the trolling motor in low, high gear, and just fish down a windy bank a while and throw your favorite bait, the spinnerbait. Keep it up pretty close to the top of the water, because so many times in clear water situations especially, if the fish are aggressive at all, something moving real fast like the spinnerbait is really the only bait that they'll really take moving, because I mean they just won't hit it moving slow. They get too good a look at it. Now if the water was down below 60 degrees, I'd say move your bait a little bit slower, because fish are a little more sluggish then and not near as aggressive. That's especially important in clear water, is the speed that bait's moving. If the water was real dingy or off-colored, I'd say, crank it quite a bit slower, bump the cover with it. So many times in clear water situations, bass will come out of 10, 15 foot of water to hit a bait. A lot of the times when you're fishing clear water lakes, it has a lot of rock and vertical dropping banks, and you're really staying in close to the channels themselves. You'll want to get your boat in a little bit closer to the bank and parallel it. That way you keep your bait in the strike zone longer. Or if you're sitting out in real deep water and throwing to the bank, you just got a real short pass through the good water, and the rest of the time you're just out there in real deep water where nothing can get it. Just had to get a little more wind. Come on around. Not only that, but I had a trot line to negotiate. Pretty little largemouth. You get this clouds moving in and a little bit wind. I just had to make a move and get out here where there's a little bit more wind, and so many times that's your key ingredient to catching fish, is just keep hitting a lot of banks. So many times you don't find a bank that has a lot of fish on it, and you just have to go from bank to bank to bank to bank in hopes of hitting one that's got 2 or 3 active fish on it. A lot of times when you're trying to figure out what kind of banks they're on, if you'll look at the lake's shoreline, you'll see here the rocks are real light colored, and they're not the heavy boulders like you have on down here about 75 to 100 yards in front of my boat. And sometimes that'll be the key factor in the banks that you need to fish, is where the bank color changes. Now that fish there wasn't on what I would call an actual channel bank. He was where the sloping bank joined the main channel bank down here. So a lot of times that's part of your pattern. is looking at the bank and what I call reading water, or reading the shoreline and fishing according to what you see. Well, we obviously had to pull out of the weather here. It's got pretty nasty. There's a big old front approaching us, and you know, in all reality right now, fish are probably biting like crazy out there, but there's not a lot I can do about it because you wouldn't be able to watch it. And you really wouldn't be able to learn anything. But some of the things that to me are very critical on dark days is a lot of times having a dark bait. See, instead of throwing a light-colored, shad-colored spook, if I get into a situation where the water's still, then I'm going to go to a black one, go to a real dark color. Usually when I'm looking for fish, and I'm choosing shades that I'm going to fish with, I'll do it with water clarity. And here I've got real clear water, so I'm going to throw a pattern that either has a blue back or a shad colored back, because in the fall of the year predominantly shad is your main food source. And that's what I'm doing here now, just getting me out a few baits so that I'll have them handy, and I run into a situation where I think this particular lure will work, I'll have it handy and I can tie it on and throw it. You know, all fishermen have different ideas of how they want to look for fish. Some of them will specifically use this certain lure that they think is going to work. And I've always found that myself, I'm a situation fisherman, and I'll do better if I've got 5 rods at a minimum sitting out on the deck, sometimes even 7, with a different lure on each one of them for situations that I think I'll encounter during that day. And when I'm looking for bass, that's the way I like to do it. I hate changing lures all the time, and so many times when I go out there looking for fish, I'll have 5 or 6 rods rigged up with the lures I think that's going to work, and that is the lures I'll throw all day. I'll never make a lure change, simply because I've got faith in these lures, and the water that I'm fishing is proper for these lures. You know, a lot of times we fish through areas that have fish in them, and when they're in shallow water in the fall of the year and the water is real clear, sometimes, I mean, it takes a specific lure to catch them bass. And a lure like the sluggo or a floating worm, these two have a totally different action. This one is very erratic, and this one here is kind of a sluggish movement. And it's very light, and it hits the water without making any noise. And so many times that's the critical part of getting fish to take your bait, is the specific lure you're throwing. And I've got these laid out here so that when I go through an area that I think has fish in it, and I can't get them to hit a topwater bait or a spinner bait, and the water may be slick and a little bit of sun on it, then I'll go to the floating worm or the sluggo, because that'll trigger fish into biting that won't chase ordinary lures. The rain has stopped, at least mostly, and I'm going to just pull right back out here and start fishing, because a lot of times in these clear water lakes, boy, I'll tell you what, that rain and them clouds is a big blessing, and it turns fish on, and you can catch them better when the weather's nasty than you can at any other time. Golly, he hit right at the boat. Well, you sorry outfit. That fish throwed that bait right out of his mouth. Boy, he wanted it though. He come right out of that 15-foot water, and I saw him coming up behind it. You know, sometimes the lure itself is has got a lot to do with how many fish you catch, and I'm getting a few fish to look at that spinnerbait. I'm going to throw that floating worm just a little bit here and see if I can catch more of them. Boy, that thing is deadly, deadly in clear water. I rig it up and just put a swivel about 8 inches ahead of it. Gives it a little bit more weight, and it also makes the worm sink just a little bit, and then put you about an 8 or 10 inch leader on it, and you just pop it along, and you can watch it all the way back to the boat. You'll see the fish take it. Now this is the time of year when the back ends of some of these creeks can be awful good now. You got a definite little creek channel running back in here. The water's 8 and 10, 12 foot deep, dropping into 15, and a lot of times this time of year you'll have a lot of bait fish come back in these coves, and this is the second one I've been in this morning, and it seems to me like that right now these pockets are pretty well dead. There's not much action back here. I'm not seeing any bait fish, no fish striking at all, and really the only pattern I can see available back in here right now might be with a jig or a worm or something right here on the channel itself, pitching around some of these trees. But if I get back in here and I don't feel right and I'm not seeing any activity at all, that usually tells me that most of the fish are out toward the main lake, and because that's where the bait is. Could be the low water. This lake's awful low right now, And usually that situation right there more than anything is what affects these fish back in the coves. When it's low like this, they just have a tendency to lay in this brush and suspend, and it makes them real hard to catch, and it's not a good pattern. One thing about it though, you can't really eliminate it till you fish a few of them. You have to look at a few of them, and sometimes you might go you know, a day or two before you get in the right creek that has a lot of bait in it. So it's not a pattern that you can give up on. It's one that you got to keep trying. Boy, you know, I find it hard to believe that I just could not get nothing going shallow down on that lower lake. As much wind and cloud covers we had. And boy, I mean, the water down there just really looked good to me. But I guess evidently the lake being real low like it is, and them fish down there in that real clear water just hadn't moved in on the banks yet. We went way up the creek here and got up here in just a little bit more off-colored water and back in another big old long creek. Maybe the fish will move in up, or maybe they're already in up here. I sure was surprised when I didn't catch any down on that lower lake. That's a nice fish. Just had to get up here in a little bit more off-color water. Pretty bass. Boy, now he come right up there and got it like they're supposed to in the fall, waking it right on the surface, back in a nice cove here. And the first one really that I've been in that's got some bait in it. Pretty nice bass. Maybe we got a little something working here. I was awakening it right up on top. He just jumped up there like he'd been waiting on it all day long. A lot of times that's the key. Just keep running in pockets till you find one that's got the bait fish in it. So many times when you get back in little pockets like this one right here and they neck down and you don't have any side pockets and it's just a straight bank on each side going on to the back. In the fall of the year they may not be as good as they are in the springtime. So once I develop a pattern that I'm not catching any fish in this type of creek, so I don't work my way on back in there. Now if it's springtime, I'd say yes, you better continue on down that bank. But fall of the year, especially with the lake low and the water not rising, I'd turn around right here and start working my way back out. Not too bad. Boy, this pattern here is more or less taking a lure and just covering miles of water and hunting for a fish. It's not really getting in an area that's got a lot of fish so far. Just having to make a lot of casts, and even on a good overcast day like this, it's just like most of the fish are still in deep water. Hopefully we'll figure more out a little later. Well, if you can't catch them shallow on a rainy day like this, I don't know what a guy'd do if the sun popped out good and bright. He'd be in deep trouble. Now he come off that isolated cedar. I've been spending too much time throwing at rocks. Boy, I'll tell you one thing though, you flat have to chunk that thing a bunch of miles before you can get a bite. That's what you call working for them. Finding fish and just making a million casts till you find one that'll bite. The 4 or 5 fish I've caught today on that spinnerbait have all come off the bank. They've hit it halfway to the boat, every one of them. Water temperature ain't that hot. These fish ought to have done moved in, but they hadn't done it. Isn't that pretty? You know, a lot of times when I'm fishing a new lake and I come back in after a day's fishing, and that's when I really sit down and look at the map and try to evaluate exactly what the lake does have to offer me to fish. And this will also give me an idea on where I want to concentrate my time the next day. And when I'm fall fishing and looking for bass in the fall, I like to select an area that, you know, offers me a good bit of water, but yet it offers me a variety of different situations. The section of the lake that I fished today and the same section that I plan on fishing tomorrow, after fishing it one day and looking at it real close and seeing all the available types of cover, I've decided that, you know, basically most of the fish are not on the bank. I feel like they're either in the isolated cover, which is cedar trees, or I really feel like the majority of the fish are in deeper water. Because I beat the banks pretty hard in this area today, and I went way back in a lot of creeks and pockets. I spent a lot of time on throwing a spinnerbait at the bank, fishing the little side pockets back in some of these coves, little small pockets, but most of the majority of the time I spent way back in the coves or fishing main lake points. I spent a lot of time throwing at big rocks on points where the wind was blowing in, because so many times that wind will push the bait up on the bank and the fish will go with the bait. But I've come to the conclusion that I'm either going to have to get on up the creek, way on up here in a little bit dingier water where I know the fish have to be shallow, or I'm going to have to concentrate my efforts more in deep water. You know, when you first start fishing on a lake that you've never been on before, and it's very difficult to get started. And when I get into an area that I think I want to fish, like let's say this major creek right here, one creek arm, I'll usually fish the whole thing. I went around this whole creek with a spinnerbait, throwing at all the broken rocks on these banks right here. I worked my way back into these pockets and I fished them nearly to the back. I'd come out of it and go into this other creek, just throwing at everything available. Keying mostly on rocks because I thought that was what the main pattern was going to be. I did throw at a lot of isolated brush. I worked the cedars with a spook. I just tried a lot of different things back in here except structure fishing. I also come out of this main feeder creek and I worked a lot of main lake banks, anywhere I could find chunk rock with the wind blowing in, still throwing mainly two lures, a spook and a spinnerbait. And then I worked my way up the river. I'd go in a creek up here, hoping to run into something a little bit different, maybe some bait fish, some shad. I worked this creek all the way to the back. I've done the same thing on all these creeks up here. And I pretty well eliminated that there just wasn't that many fish relating directly to the banks. Now, there might have been an occasional bass on a cedar tree if I could find the right isolated tree, but it just didn't work out as good in shallow water as I thought it would. So I'm going to spend a little bit more time up in the upper reaches of this creek tomorrow, maybe where there's a little more dingy water, and see if there is a few more bigger fish up shallow up there. But the main thing right now, I think the percentages are better in this portion right here and fishing deep, because I feel like there's a good number of fish in deep water. And you know, in all reality, a lot of times a limit of fish every day and one kicker fish will win the tournament. So that's where I'm going to spend the majority of my time. Well, we're out here this morning. It's day 2, trying to find fall bass. It stormed, it rained, it done everything you can think of last night. And yesterday we really had a pretty tough day. I concentrated more on rocks because to me the fall of the year, rocks is just predominantly one of the best patterns. But late yesterday afternoon I caught a fish off of an isolated cedar tree, and today I'm going to key a little bit more on cedars. We've still got cloud cover in here. The front hadn't come through yet. So we're going to key a little bit more on the offshore cover and see what happens out here, and hopefully later today, maybe if the winds will let us, we're going to try a little bit of deep water and see if we can find some fish in deep water. But right now we're going to key on isolated cover in pockets and on points. Cedar trees is the obvious cover here, so we're going to spend a little bit more time on it. There's a massive cold front going to come through. It's supposed to get down into the 30s tonight and high tomorrow only in the low 50s, so we got some real interesting weather to work with. But hopefully we can put together a little bit more than what we did yesterday. You go out here and you'll do something all day long and you just might not be in the right area. So you really can't you can't eliminate it just because it didn't work one day. You got to try a new area. Or go back and maybe fish the same water you fished yesterday, but just reverse your tactics. Don't even throw at the cover you keyed on all day long yesterday, which was rocks. And totally change your pattern and just fish the stuff away from the bank. That's a good school of fish. That beats anything I ever seen. They're just jumping all over us. That's what I kind of had a feeling, you know, when you beat the bank as much as we have, it just means that so many of the fish are out here in open water. This is something we run into every fall. They just get out here and chase shad, and boy, they get hard to catch. Down under the school, that feels like a good one. I hope it's a bass. You know, this is something that happens a lot in the fall as they get out here and bust them shad. Definitely a bass. You see them up on the surface out over the center of the creek channel, and shad activity. And you can take a spoon and go down below them breaking fish, and every now and then you'll catch a number of bass. To me, spoon fishing is one of the funnest things to do because a lot of times you catch a number of fish. You might get into an area and catch 20 or 30 bass out of one little area. And usually they'll congregate around creek channels. You'll find a point or a hump on the bank of a creek, and you might be fishing the shoreline, and all of a sudden you look out in the middle of the cove and there's shad up on top and a few bass busting them, and that's when I'll move out on the point and start searching down below them shad with a spoon and see if there's any bigger fish down there. Occasionally you can catch some good fish. So many times in the fall of the year, the major schools of fish are not bank related. They'll be out in the middle, closer to the creek channel. That's funny, yesterday we never saw any bait anywhere on the lake. And today with that big front coming in, it's just real still and humid right now, and the shad are up on top, and there's a little bass movement going on, and it's just totally different than yesterday. There's another one. Just got to throw that thing out there and let it sink down below that school. And a lot of times that's where your bigger fish are hanging, is down below the school. Well, he just jumped plumb out of the water, didn't he? About a spoon. Usually you lose a lot of fish on a spoon when they jump. Not too bad. Little largemouth. I kind of figured that was probably Kentucky's out here doing all that jumping. You really want to watch your electronics close, because a lot of times you'll see them shad down on the screen, and the shad might be down there 25 or 30, maybe even 40 feet deep. And a lot of times you can get out over them bait fish and vertical jig that spoon. Just get it right down in that level where the fish are and just vertical jig it and you'll catch fish. This is a situation right here that I see in a lot of lakes in the fall of the year. And if you'll notice, there's nobody out here fishing right now. You'll have the whole lake to yourself. And it usually occurs right before one of them big old cold fronts goes through. Shad just come to the surface and the bass run them, and a lot of times you can catch them on top water, and boy, that's when I really like it. There's one right down under the boat. That one was down there deep, and he feels like a big fish. That is a good fish. He is down there about 40 foot, right where that bait is. I just got my bait down deep and just kept it down there. Pretty good largemouth too. I tell you, most of them fish just ain't in the shallows. I figured that out yesterday. That's a nice largemouth there. Good bass. Down there about 35, 40 foot down. That's fall fishing. Boy, they get down there and they school up where them shad are, and you can fish all over the lake, and you swear there ain't a bass in the lake. And they're all out here in the center of these coves. Get down there on little old points or ledges, and when you find them, boy, it's easy. They're just hard to find. We missed them yesterday. Of course, that's practicing. I mean, when you're looking for fish, naturally you're going to fish a lot of shoreline and just kind of get a feel of what's going on in the lake. And you have to eliminate things. I mean, it's not something that you can just saying, well, I'm going to go out there and catch them shallow, because a lot of times they're not there. Now this is what you call following the bait. I mean, the bass are where the bait are. I stayed shallow yesterday most of the day, and there was just no bait in them creeks. All the bait's out here in this deep water, and the fish are out here with them. Oh, I missed that one. I got him that time. Come on up there and jump again. Boy, they're getting a hold of it. They're going to feed good before this front goes through. Normally on that spoon you lose a lot of fish, but they're hanging on to it pretty good today. This is when fishing's fun to me. I like it when I can see them. You know, you don't get to see them a lot of times. You have to look for them, and you're not able to see where they are, but they come up after them shad. You can see them on top. But usually you'll catch your bigger ones down deep. I mean, the bigger fish will be down under the schools. Just let that spoon just sink right on down there to what you think's 25 or 30 feet. And so many times they'll get it as it's going down. I mean, it's hard to really estimate right where your spoon is. But when you're around the fish and you just throw it in there and let it fall, or when it gets down there to where the better ones are, you usually want to hit it on the sink. That there was down about 20 foot. "20 foot deep. They're not big fish, but they're fun. You really need to watch for birds when you're fishing in the fall of the year, because them birds will really find you a bunch of fish. They go where the shad are, just like the bass. You see seagulls or herons, either one, dropping in the water, that usually tells me that that's a good area to fish. I mean, it may turn out to be stripers or white bass, but you never know. It can also be bass. I thought these fish were just little Kentuckys, but believe me, there's some good largemouth in here. In fact, I haven't caught a Kentucky yet. When I saw them breaking, I just figured it was all Kentuckys or white bass. Turned out to be largemouth. I got down there deep and got a better fish again. Them fish up on top, a lot of times you're better off just ignoring them. Whoa, good one. Pretty good bass. Look what a sore on that fish. My lands. You need to go see the doctor. Boy, it's hard to ignore them that's jumping. Oh. He hit it before it got down there. Just throw it in them and let it fall till one gets it. He's a small one. This is the way fall fishing can be. It can be either feast or famine. It can be so tough, and yet it can be so easy and so much fun when you do get into them. But the bigger ones are definitely down there deep. The big ones are about 35 to 40 foot, down underneath the breaking fish, just hanging around them shad. Suspended out over this deep water. Well, it's only about 40 foot right here. This is probably what's holding them right here where it drops into that old creek. Got it then. Come right up there and hit that spook. Always keep your topwater handy when you're out here fishing these ledges, because you never know when they're going to come up and break on shad. That's the first spotted bass I've seen. Whoa, here, it just barely got him too. Look at the tummy on that Kentucky. He has been eating them shad. So you always want to keep it ready and throw back out there even after they've gone down, because a lot of times he'll still be hanging around there and you can call him right back up on top. You know, this situation we've got today, a lot of people wouldn't have even went fishing. That weatherman this morning really tried to talk us out of going out. I mean, he called for really bad stuff, and evidently that little front has kind of stalled, and it really has these fish up on top, moving around. Yesterday we never saw nothing up on the surface, nothing. No fish striking. Go ahead and take it. He hit at it, but he never opened his mouth. Oh, that one did. When you got weather like this and fish up on top, I believe I got two of them. No, I had two of them. One of them got off. When you got weather like this and you get out here, see, the fish will show you where they are, and it's not near as hard to work. That's another. Look at the shad that thing spit up. He has just been gorging on them. Another pretty Kentucky. I've never seen so much bait. Look at that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 shad he spit up in the floor of my boat. Pretty Kentucky. Messy. Look like sardines. There, I got him. Boy, they're really getting active now. You know, that last fish a while ago, I had two of them on there at the same time. One of them come off. All spotted bass out here on the main lake. I mean, beautiful spotted bass. I love the color on spotted bass. He is just beautiful. Ah. That is a beautiful fish. I'll tell you, when it gets like this so many times, them fish just come off that bottom and you just, look at there, they're schooling right behind him. They must be a school chasing him to the boat. When they come off that bottom, the only way you can catch them is up on top. Boy, it's a pretty fish. Absolutely beautiful. Ow! Well, thing about it, he got a mouthful of it. That is a pretty Kentucky. I can't get over how fat they are. I'm trying to develop as many different patterns as I possibly can right now, and to kind of evaluate which one would be the best as far as catching numbers of fish. And right now I'm on a bluff where a channel runs in here pretty close to this bluff bank, got a lot of cedars on it. And this is one of them lakes that typically has a lot of real deep fish in it, 35, 40, 45, 50 foot. And it's usually big Kentuckies that you catch down that deep. Sometimes you'll catch a smallmouth, but it's usually big Kentuckies. And I'm sitting here and just making short casts right up on that lip there. I'm sitting in about 45 to 47 foot, just up off the channel, and pitching in the tops of some big old sunken cedar trees that are down there with a jig. Just trying to get on some fish that are down deep. Because many times, I'll tell you what happens is when you got clear weather coming in, a lot of sunshine, well, these fish will quit schooling, and your shallow fish, they get to where you can't hardly catch them at all, and you better have a deep water pattern. You better be able to catch them several different ways in clear water lakes. I mean, them shallow fish, boy, they get hard to catch when that sun pops out. And really all you have to do then, to me it's easy because I like to fish deep. I just soon fish deep water as anything there is. I feel like it's the most stable pattern that you can possibly get on a real clear water lake in the fall of the year. Anytime a front goes through and you get them bright skies and no wind, boy, them shallow water bass are history, and their schooling bass are through too. You won't see no more bass schooling, and you've got to fish deep then. Boy, he was down there deep, about 45, 50 foot, straight down. Come on, I want to see you. Big Kentucky, good Kentucky. When you bring them out of that deep of water, boy, they just don't fight a whole lot. That thing didn't fight hardly at all. Not like one of them topwater bites. Man, he was down there deep. That's a long ways. The only bad thing about fishing that deep and catching them that deep, if you don't turn them loose right quick, they have a tendency to get a case of the bends, and hard to get them to go back down there. But if you release them instantly, they'll turn around, they'll go back down there and readjust. When you're fishing that deep, it's pretty critical that you vertical fish most of the time. Just make a little short cast like I made there and feed that jig straight down. Boy, and you don't feel much when you do get a bite. You'll just pick up on it and it'll just be kind of mushy. That's one thing about deep water fishing is once you get an idea of where you think the fish are, you want to try to keep your bait right in that depth all you can. That way you don't waste a lot of time making big old long casts over there in a different depth of water. And after fishing just a little while and watching the graph and seeing where all the activity level it is, it seems like the activity level is about 40 feet. 40 to 50 feet is where I've been seeing all the bait fish, with the exception of the ones that are schooling. And so I'm keying right now on 40 to 50 feet where I've got rock points dropping into channels. And you make short casts with that jig and you more or less just vertical fish him straight up and down. Once he drops off into that deep water, you want to just reel him up and make you another short little pitch. That way you're keeping your lure in that contact zone. Well, the weatherman wasn't too wrong. The front finally got here, and boy, it got plumb nasty down on the big lake. And we're going to move on up in the river. Get up here. We're up the river now where there's quite a bit more dingy water. And I'm going to try to put together a little bit of a shallow water pattern up here, either with a crankbait or a spinnerbait, and just stay with the banks totally, because a lot of times on a lot of our lakes, you'll have totally different fishing on the main lake than you do up in the river or up in the major creeks. And there's always two different patterns. And usually the dingier the water, the shallower the fish are going to be. So we've made a pretty good little boat ride here and come way up in the river, and we're going to stay with it up here till we quit and see if we can't put together something in this dingy water. When you're up in them rivers and creeks in the fall, something you always want to think about is a flipping pattern, because a lot of lakes that we fish will have a flipping pattern. And now this one don't have a whole lot of that kind of cover right there, but when I find some of it, I'm going to lay my spinnerbait down and always flip it real good, because fish have a tendency to get real tight on cover even in the fall of the year. If you're not getting them to hit a crankbait or a spinnerbait, you sure want to flip everything that relates to the channels. And when you're working way back in these creeks and you're working rocks trying to develop a crankbait pattern or a spinnerbait pattern, either one, or trying to find an area that's got a whole lot of fish in them, you really want to pay close attention to your cover. Like coming up right out here in front of me, there's an isolated brush pile that's out off the bank out there all by itself, and a lot of times that'll be a real key, so you want to really work them kind of places carefully. I mean, it may not work out that that's what we're looking for, but that right there, isolated cover, especially in a lake when the lake level is falling or the lake level's real low, your fish will pull off the bank and they'll get in cover like that right there. Slow roll a spinnerbait through it, or try flipping around it. Just drag your spinnerbait right through the center of it real slow, because a lot of times your bigger fish will move into that isolated cover. That's the way I won that last megabucks. All the bigger fish I caught in that tournament came off of isolated wood, just like that right there, just a little brush pile. It don't take a whole lot. Most lakes have quite a bit of that in them. This is this particular lake here. It has more rock and more standing timber, cedars, than anything else. Usually when you find a piece of wood like that all by itself, there's a fish in it. There was one right on the rocks. Pretty good largemouth. Pretty good largemouth. Come on. I mean, he was glued to the bank now. But boy, I'll tell you what, I've made a bunch of casts to get him to bite. A lot of times in the fall, that's you know, when you're looking for shallow fish, you just got to make a lot of casts to get 5 or 6 fish to bite. It never is fast and furious like it is if you can find them out there in that deeper water. Work, work, work. A lot of times the size of the pocket has a lot to do with whether or not you catch fish. You go in one of them big creeks, ones you can go way back in, and you won't catch anything. But if you find a little short side pocket like this one, I mean right here off the main channel, a lot of times this is the key to getting more bites on a spinnerbait. You'll just, I don't know whether you can fish them faster or maybe they're closer to the main channel, but they're just little short pockets. So many times they're in the little bitty pockets close to the main channel rather than in the great big ones. Now this is a situation right here you run into a lot on all of our lakes, even in the spring and fall, where you've got a definite wall of mud coming down a main channel. And a lot of times when this mud line starts filtering out into the main lake, that'll be a good section to fish. But I never do well trying to fish in brand new mud like that. So myself personally, I'm just not that kind of fisherman, and I run into a wall of new mud coming down the river. That's usually where I'll end. But one thing you really got to watch for here is a lot of times you'll have little feeder creeks coming in that'll still be clear, and it'll provide that good mix in watercolor that, boy, sometimes it can really be good. So you kind of got to play that by ear, whatever you prefer to fish. And myself being more of a main lake fisherman, and I just feel like there's more numbers of bass out on the main lake, and that's where I usually spend more of my fishing time. But you got to come up here and try these areas, because sometimes they can be good and sometimes they can be big fish. Well, today worked out a whole lot better than yesterday. We got into some areas that had a lot of fish, a lot of bait. The fish were up on top where you could see them, and that makes it a lot easier for the fishermen. I didn't do as well in the upper reaches up here as I really wanted to do. I really thought that if I got up here where the water was a little dingier, that fishing would be better and we'd catch more fish up here. But for some reason, maybe it's the lake falling, the lake may be real low, even with all the rain, there's just not many fish relating to the bank in this particular major section of the lake. Maybe another section might be a little bit better, but I really doubt it. I think most of the bass are deep, and they're going to stay deep for the winter. But we did catch one good fish up here on a little channel bank, right in the mouth of a small pocket. But the only bad part about that is there's not a lot of that type of water up there. It's just, it didn't seem to me like there was a good possibility to catch a good string of fish up in this area. And the reason why I keep coming back to this particular creek is because if you'll look, it's the biggest creek in this area. It has 3 different arms. It has a good major creek channel. It has a lot of underwater structure right in here. So I went back into the same creek simply because I know fish live there. I mean, there's got to be bass in there. And today these fish were busting shad. They were all out here in the middle running these schools of shad. And if you look real close at this map, you can see right here there's a long underwater point that's don't really look like a point looking at the bank, but under the water it runs way out here and joins the creek channel right here. And this is where the majority of these fish were schooling and busting these bait. And it just offers you such a nice channel break way out here. It's got good straight vertical drops into the creek. And if you'll look right here on the end of it, one of the key areas where these fish were doing such heavy schooling, it ends right here, and it has a couple what I call hooks, underwater hooks. And them places right there is where these fish mat up and get on the bottom in the fall and the winter. And this spot's going to be good all winter long. It's a place that the fish are going to be there from now on until next spring when they go back to shallow water. And it offers that vertical drop, and there was some standing timber out here right on the edge of the creek. The fish weren't really using the trees, but it made it easy for me to identify this point by looking at the standing trees. I mean, they were just kind of in a line around this underwater bar. And this is a place where these fish will really school up. And especially after cold weather, you get quite a bit of cold weather and it drives the shad down to the bottom in deep water where the bass just go with them. And I mean, it offers me a lot of possibilities. And the two key places to fish is this end of it right here, where it has a little point that sticks out here all by itself and drops into the channel, and then also on this back side right here where this first little hook is, you have the same thing. You have a point that extends back toward the back of the creek, and these are the two key places that I would work. Now if you get in there and the fish are scattered, I mean, you can't really find a wad of them, then you might want to start right in here and just work the edge of this whole area just nice and slow all the way around this end with either a spoon or a jigging frog or a plastic worm. Another type of water that I key on a lot in the fall is bluff ends. And this is what I call a bluff. Right here where these contour lines get real tight together and real close to the bank, usually that's a bluff. And in the fall now, your fish will be more out here in this type of area, away from the bluff, yet adjoining the bluff, where you can keep your boat in the channel and pitch your bait in anywhere from 20 to 40 foot of water. This all depends now on how deep the fish are. If the fish are in 40, then you're going to be way out here sitting in 70 or 80 foot and making just a little short cast right up on that lip. And this particular type of water here, especially right here off the end of this island. Now I run into the same situation here as I had back here in this creek. The fish were not on the bottom, they were up on top busting shad, but the bass were there. You know, I could visually see them. I caught them on a spook. And but after this front goes through, the weather changes. The fish aren't going to leave there. They're still here, but they're going to be on this break line somewhere. And it's just a matter of keeping your boat in deep water and pitching right up on that lip and working this ledge all the way out until you find the depth that the fish are in. And by looking at the map, I would say they're going to be right here, right where you see that little hook. That's another hook. The deep water comes down through here and it extends into this bar right here, and it just gives you a variety of underwater contours right there. And in all probability, that's where they're going to be schooled up when they go to the bottom. And the same thing, a jig and spoon, a plastic worm or a jig would be my primary baits, and fish right on the bottom, and continue to keep your boat as close as you can to that ledge and pitch up on that 40-foot break line. So many times in tournament fishing, knowing what not to do is very good. It keeps you from thinking about things that you haven't tried. So rather than staying down here in this big water and catching more fish and finding more areas, I wanted to get this out of my mind. I ran on up the river up here to where the water made a color change. And it changed approximately right in this area right here. It started to get a little bit darker. It wasn't necessarily dirty or muddy, but it was just a little bit darker green color. And I keyed on this one main creek here, and I worked every inch of this creek, all the way to the back of it. And so many times when you lose your depth of water, if you get past a point back here and you don't have any 10 to 15 foot water, there's not going to be many fish back there in that channel. So I wouldn't waste hardly any time at all. Just come back here and make a few casts, and if you don't have a good channel, get on out of there. But I worked my way all the way out of this channel, and the only fish I caught up here in this area right here, where you have this small side pocket running off into the main creek, you have a little bluff end right there. And it offers a fish several things. Quick access to deep water. The fish was up shallow, and it was a nice, good largemouth on a spinnerbait. but there was very little other stuff up in this area here to fish. We had a real mud change right in this area, and we just didn't do much up here at all. I spent a lot of time throwing at these rocks, and to me it's just, there wasn't that many fish up there that were catchable. Another important feature that you really need on your boat in the fall of the year is that graph. Now that graph will really show you the level that the bait fish is, and it'll show you the level that the bass are. A lot of times I really can't tell the difference between the two looking at that screen, but when I see a lot of activity at a certain depth level down there, that gives me a place to start. And you know, there's a couple of key baits that I used, and a lot of people don't think much about spoons, and they really don't even fish with spoons much. But a spoon is a primary lure in the fall of the year. A spoon, a grub, a gets-it, anything that you can get down there deep and get into that level that the fish are holding. And you know they're feeding on shad. Them lures right there are shad imitation lures. And you know, you just need to have them in your fall fishing arsenal. When you're looking at your graph and you see that solid line down there at that 40-foot level, that is probably just a massive bunch of bait fish down there, maybe with some bass mixed in, and they're right here at a certain level. Now the big clouds that you see going by between you and that 40-foot level, you see this big old cloud go across your screen, that is usually a school of moving bait fish. And so many times you really can't see the fish in that school, but the fish are right with the shad, or they're under them or around them, and them shad there are usually just moving, but that solid line down there at 40 foot, that gives you an area that you need to cover with your lure, because usually that is the lower level of the oxygen zone or the pH zone or whatever it is, and there's not too many fish below that zone right there. So you want to fish right there in that level where you see all that activity. One down there in that cedar tree. He's not a very big fish though. Well, he's not too bad. Kentucky. Well, we're back on Table Rock Lake, trying to establish a deep water pattern here. Fish very seldom move. We've been gone a week now and just now getting back on the lake and just trying to make sure that the fish are still deep. You know, when you're looking for bass, we've eliminated a lot of shallow water. We've got out there and we've cranked and we've spinnerbaited and we've done a lot of different things, and we're pretty well sure that the fish are deep, and that's what we're going to do, is just continue to fish deep today and just see how well we can do with them. The one's down there really deep. Come on up here. Oh, there's a big one right with him. Another big one's following him. That's a largemouth, I think. Big old black spots on him. Look at that spotted bass. Come here. Pretty good little largemouth. We moved in on a bluff. Now a lot of times a bluff like this is more of a winter pattern. They'll move in on these bluffs, but on a lot of days when you can't get out there on the main lake and the wind's blowing real hard, you can move in on these bluffs, and there's always fish lives on these bluffs. And if you can just figure out how deep they are, you know, you can put your bait right down there on the bottom and catch some pretty good fish. You know, there's a lot of baits to use when you're fishing in deep water, and one that is very effective for pretty sluggish fall time bass is a spider jig, or what they call a hula grub. It's very much like fishing a plain old grub, but it gives it a little bit more bulk. It's an all rubber bait, and it's not as big as a jig and frog, and there's many times that you'll catch more numbers on something like this than you will a jig and frog. Oh, I think it's another one of them little brownies. No, it might not be. Oh, it's a better brownie. Not too bad a brownie. Would you look at that humpback brownie? Look at that thing's back. That is incredible. I don't know how he fought it all. I don't believe I've ever seen one quite that bad. Looks like he got run over with a truck or something. Pretty good little brownie though. find them deep on these ledges, you never know what you're going to catch. It'll be a Kentucky one time, a largemouth once, smallmouth, you just don't know. I like fishing these lakes that have a variety of bass in them. But they are down there deep, I will say that for them. What this is it's a straight down bluff wall. It goes down to about 20 feet under the water, 20 feet deep, and then it runs out here a little ways to about 30, and then it shelves off again to 50, and then the river, I'm sitting right on the break line of the river here, and it's got timber up and down the edge of that break there at about 40 foot. And these fish are sitting right there where it breaks off from 40 into the river. It's really not the type of place where you'll catch a big school of fish, but it's a stretch of water where you'll catch fish all up and down it. I mean, it really don't have an outstanding feature such as an underwater bar that runs out off of it. It's pretty well just a straight channel bank, but it's one of them short channel banks so that you don't have to spend a lot of time trying to figure out where the fish are. A little small bass, but not too bad. And a lot of times you get out in this clear water and you're not having much luck. Put that little grub on a spinning rod, a little bit lighter line, and it just gives it a little different fall. Tell you can not only that, but you can fish a little grub head in a grub a lot better on spinning tackle, because when it hits the water, naturally you're giving it just a little bit of slack off the reel, and it just throws so much easier and falls so much better, and to me you get more strikes on it because of that natural fall. That fish was on a little channel bank there where a creek channel bent in on the rocks. Every now and then you'll find a little spot like that and there'll be a whole school of them. You can sit there and catch several of them. Clearwater lakes. Now, a lot of times on these clearwater lakes, little fish in the 12 to 13 inch range or 14 inch range, when the tournament's all over with, they'll be good. Maybe not. Running at me. Bad. Seems to be a pretty good little old school of Kentuckys down there on that channel. Not big, but they're fun. Remember, that's one thing that I told you very, very early in this video, is fish them channels. You stay with creek channels and stay with pockets and coves, stay with ditches and cuts, and then fish whatever available cover you got, whether it's rocks or logs or wood or just whatever kind of cover you got, and you'll find fish if you stay with the creeks. That even feels like a little better one. Well, I'll be. That's a pretty good little bass right there. Largemouth. Still on the little grub. Light line. You know, he's not a big fish, but I've sat right here and caught, 7 or 8 little old bass and a mostly spotted bass with one largemouth thrown in there, and all of them on the light line and the grub. And really, what that shows you is that just shows you how many patterns is available in the fall of the year. We've tried many different things. I fished a lot of spinnerbaits, a lot of crankbaits back in the creeks. Fished a lot of deep water, caught fish on spoons, grubs, jigs, very few on a spinnerbait and very few on a crankbait, but we don't always get to catch fish on lures that we want to throw. And what I've hoped I've showed you is how to go through a few of the changing things that happens in the fall of the year, how to fish different types of water, and a selection of lures to work your way through and hopefully to help you find a few more fish. And one thing I want to point out, the fall of the year, you don't always catch these great big bass. Fall of the year to me is a time of the year that you catch numbers. Lots of little 12 to 15 inch bass, and they school up and congregate, and you'd really be surprised how many times that'll do well in our tournaments. Hope this helps you find a few more fish in the fall of the year.
We hope you've enjoyed this presentation as much as we have in bringing it to you. Our goal is to provide you with the most on-target outdoor videos available to the sportsman today.